Why did you decide you wanted to talk now?
Now, his first interview anywhere since being convicted of assaulting.
Okay, just found out that Jonathan Majors is going to be on GMA on the 9th, on Monday the 9th. Well, that's exciting. Wow. I think he should be on GMA and Club Shay. Also, of course, there's all sorts of discussion, as of course there should be. Should he do it? Should he do an interview? Should he do this? Should he do that? Of course, I think he should. I think he should be talking all over the place. What do you have to lose? Marvel fires you 5 seconds after a split verdict for a misdemeanor, for 2 misdemeanors, one of which is really a ticket and a misdemeanor. It doesn't even matter, right? Because the headline is always going to read, he was convicted. He was convicted of assault. You've got to be talking. If you're not talking, you lose by default. That's how this comms game works in this era of technology. Whether anybody likes it or not, that's what it is. So here's a tweet from one of the smartest people on TV, Bakari Sellers, who's an attorney and a really smart cookie. He writes, "This is more terrible lawyering. Nothing good can come of this before sentencing." Sentencing is in February, by the way. "I've never heard a judge say, 'I heard your interview. I will grant you leniency, mercy, and grace.' But they will say, 'Saw your little interview where you lack remorse. Lock his ass up.'" Yeah, well, so Bakari, of course, is right about, about the disposition of most judges. But here's what I saw in court, and I think that this is pretty much true. It doesn't make any difference. The judge was against him. The judge was leaning for the prosecution. I don't think that changes whether he does an interview or doesn't do an interview. I can't imagine that he's going to get out there on GMA with 3 million people watching and lack remorse or lack any sort of effort to look as if, wow, I'm really sorry this whole thing happened. However, and I'm sure that Bakari Sellers doesn't know this, because Bakari Sellers, who, by the way, has a book coming out in April, and I'm a big fan of his, he doesn't know the detail, because who would know the detail unless you were in court? It was a courtroom that only seats about 50 people, half of whom were not media, more than half of whom. So it's about 20 people in that courtroom that get to walk out of there and tell the story of what happened to Jonathan Majors in the case of this allegation, really against really Jonathan Majors versus Alvin Bragg, if you ask me. Not so much Grace Jabbari, but Alvin Bragg was the real opponent. So I don't expect that folks would know all the details, because that's the whole point of getting your story out. The media is not going to tell his story. They're never going to tell his story. There has never been a media era that has said, let's tell the story of black males who've been accused of something like that. That's never happened. And now what's going on is everybody is basically misinformed. It's really a sort of form of disinfo and misinfo. You're seeing deeper analysis of the Jonathan Majors case on YouTube than you are on any of the media platforms of any of the people represented in that courtroom. That is just a fact.
But as they were walking in, I got a better look at one of the other jurors that I thought was Caucasian. She is a female. She is probably Hispanic-ish or somewhere ethnic. Let's just put it that way. So that takes us down to just one white female. One Hispanic appearing male, 2 Asian men, 1 black woman. Just to correct that, just so that when we get to jury deliberation time, you have more, perspective of who's deliberating.
Grace Jabbari thought it was like 2 minutes, and then the video, it's just a mere matter of seconds, like 5 seconds. Jonathan Majors is already exiting on the other side of the car through that door into the road, with Jabbari pulling at him, and that's apparently when you see the white shirt unveil, because the button on his jacket just popped. Now, when Jonathan Majors gets to the hotel, he did take pictures of his ripped coat pocket and his coat buttons being popped off, and attributes it to this moment. And on cross-examination, even though Jabbari tried to resist, she eventually conceded.
And the court does not want you to draw that inference. However, there are exceptions to that rule. And one of those exceptions would be if the defense opened the door to that evidence coming in, making it a relevant inquiry for the jury to consider.
And so when a jury comes to a particular conclusion that people either don't expect or maybe even don't want, it's important to dig in, look under the hood, and try to figure out how the jury may have come to the conclusion that they did.
One thing I am going to say is that I'm very highly disappointed that no other actors, especially black actors, just stood up for the brother. At least you don't have to say if he's innocent or guilty. Just stand up for the brother's character. Unless his character is what it is, you know, none of you guys stood up. Now, that gives me pause. Did you not stand up for the brother because the brother actually has a bad attitude? He's actually, quote unquote, a bad guy? Or do you didn't want to lose your position of where you're at?
That would have been like, okay, he saw what happened. He's reliable. I can go off on his account. But if I'm looking at that and they didn't even ask that question, then I have zero confidence that they even established.
What do you know about Lindsay Davis? She's the one interviewing Jonathan Majors.
I've seen a couple of her interviews. I've seen her when she interviewed 21 Savage a couple years ago when he was going through his situation with ICE.
So the point here is that Bakari makes a good point. It's a logical point to make, and I've heard it a million times. And in all the crisis cases I've been involved in, it doesn't work. The other side wants you to shut up. They don't want you out there talking. They don't want you saying stuff. They don't want you getting on GMA with 4 million people, 3 million people watching, and then making a case for yourself that may, in fact, make them look bad at some point and getting the public informed about what happened. See, again, that's why it was important, the decision to block cameras in that courtroom. You know, you notice that when the Johnny Depp trial happened, everybody got to see it. Everybody got to judge for themselves what they thought happened. Everybody got to look at the case and say, you know, I may have sympathy for Miss Heard on this, but I can see why Johnny Depp said that. I can see why he might have done this or that. Individual people got to watch that. And of course, there's a lot of people in the media that want everybody to think that what they do is so magical that nobody can do it. Look, people with common sense and intelligence can figure out what is going on here by themselves. They don't need the filter of the media to figure it out. But I always think it's better when the public gets to see for themselves, and then everybody can sort of judge and evaluate what has happened. We weren't able to do that in the Jonathan Majors case because, of course, the judge not only put a gag order on the case, but of course he didn't allow any cameras in the courtroom. So the only people who know what happened are the ones that witnessed it in the courtroom. So anyway, I think he should do Club Shay Shay and GMA. And why? Well, let's look at Club Shay Shay's numbers, shall we? Shannon Sharpe is doing a really good job over there. First of all, Shannon Sharpe is really smart, and Shannon Sharpe can talk on a myriad of topics, not just entertainment and not just the celebrities. Anybody who watched him with Skip Bayless knows that. I thought a lot of the things that Shannon Sharpe would say were extremely, extremely intelligent and very, very nuanced. And that is exactly the type of discussion that Jonathan Majors should get involved in. Notice that GMA, on average, it's about 3 million views a morning. They are the #1 morning talk show. It all makes sense in that sense. But notice also that some of these new media platforms are getting huge numbers. The other thing I would say is there's a YouTube platform out there called She Dreads Me that made a really good point online last night, which was basically, why is John Majors going on there when this is a Disney production? And full disclosure, I used to work for ABC, and I was there when Disney bought ABC.
Really interesting is, did Disney reach out to you for this interview, or did you reach out to Disney for this interview? Either way it goes is weird, because if I just got fired, I don't know if I'll reach out to the company that fired me and give them the exclusive interview. And then on the flip side, Disney, if y'all just fired him, why are y'all wanting the exclusive interview? Like, this is crazy.
And that's a really good point. I mean, basically, he's doing an interview with the folks that have fired him. So that actually makes a good point. But again, he should use the biggest media platforms at his disposal to get out there and get his message out and get his story out. Because if you don't, you do lose by default. The other side wants you to shut up and say absolutely nothing. And the other side doesn't want the public to know all the details of this case. That's why everybody was good with the cameras not being there. That's why you didn't see anything from Alvin Bragg. You don't see any statements. They put that general statement out that was written by, the activists who work in their office on that issue. And so we don't get into detail. We don't get into anything like that, because once you get into detail, once you start analyzing this, it falls apart pretty quickly. Once that video came out of him running down the street, that was a big thing for everybody to say, well, wait a minute, what's going on here? He's supposed to be the bad guy and he's running down the street away from his girlfriend. Well, that doesn't really make any sense. Anyone can figure that out. You don't need some legal analyst to figure that out. I mean, it was like, that makes no sense. He's obviously de-escalating and trying to get out of this and avoid a conflict. That leads me to my last piece here, which is, what should Jonathan Majors say when he talks to the media? Well, he should say anything that keeps that video running. So if he says something like, look, I was really trying to avoid any conflict with my girlfriend. I knew she was obviously upset. I knew the thing could escalate. I didn't want it to escalate. And I just ran. I just ran down the street as fast as I could just to avoid that. And then, of course, I stayed in a hotel uptown on 77th Street. You talk like that. When he brings up the de-escalation points, GMA invariably has to run the video of her chasing him down the street. The other thing I think he should say is he should bring up the credit card use, because I think in some way he should get into this conversation that she was at a bar all night on this supposedly traumatic night. She's at a bar, running up his credit card, by the way. 2 bits of information that, of course, mainstream media buried. And you could say something very casual to get that in, like, look, I have a thing on my credit card. When somebody makes an expense, I get a text message. I was getting text messaged all night, and I saw that she was probably out using my credit card. And I kind of, frankly, wasn't as worried as I might, because, wow, she was out. But when I started getting pinged on my credit card, I guess I realized she was okay, until I got to my apartment the next morning and I was locked out.
40 minutes now. Just been at the door. I couldn't get in. I finally went downstairs and asked the doorman to help us. And they let me in via the handyman.
That's point number 3. He should bring up the fact that he called the cops when he's locked out of his own place because she locked him out. And I would bring that up because I think it's not particularly widely known that it was Jonathan Majors who called the cops, which is what set this entire story into motion. I mean, it's amazing to think about that he's the one calling the authorities, and then he's the one that ends up getting arrested. I can't imagine, if you flip the sides in this, if that was her place and he was inside and locked her out and they went in and found him on the floor of the bathroom, there would have been no sympathy. He probably would have gotten arrested under that situation, because it's not her property. It's his home, and she locked him out, and he's calling the police for assistance. And of course, because we, as I went over in other videos, we live in a country that has very little sympathy, if any, for Black men. So he's assumed to be the perpetrator of something the minute that they come in. And so it's a very, I think, interesting thing for him to bring up, that he was asking for their help and then he ends up getting arrested and then getting charged a bunch of charges for assault and everything else, and then getting convicted. It just sets this boulder into motion that, by the way, was set by him asking for help. In some way in this interview, I think he should make it clear that he was the one that called the police. And the fourth thing I would say is Grace Jabbari was texting her friends right up until the time the police showed up. There's a point that Danny Atherton made very clearly a million times that I think not only did the media bury, but if you're not paying close attention to this case, you wouldn't know anything about. She was texting her friends. And of course, she texts John Majors 34 times before the cops show up. I mean, there's a lot of ways to get that into a discussion. But the problem with GMA, and this is one of the reasons why I think you should do the Shay Club, is you don't have a lot of time and they get to edit. So if you notice, a lot of these new media channels, and Shannon Sharpe is one of them, they're not editing a whole lot of stuff. I don't think they're editing at all. The thing just runs. And the Cat Williams example, and you can see this in other examples on Shannon Sharpe's channel, these are 2-hour interviews, 2 hours and a half. In a 2-hour interview, you can say a lot. You can get into a lot of nuance. I suspect he's not going to be able to have that level of nuance on Good Morning America. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll see on Monday. But I tell you what, I will go on a long form interview, and he should do a lot of folks that don't have the implicit bias, that don't have the confirmation bias, that are not assuming he's guilty like Rolling Stone is, just assuming the man is always guilty and the woman is always right. And that's what this is. And it doesn't matter what the facts are. Get on a platform that you're allowed to actually discuss some of these details. But I would say the part where we have Grace Jabbari texting him 34 times, I would work that into the conversation. Again, another thing nobody knows about because the media is not reporting it. So we're in this endless loop, this endless cycle of not knowing anything. Public doesn't know anything about that. And then, of course, everybody's just playing off of the headlines of he was convicted of assault, then dropping the word misdemeanor in most of those headlines. So it's kind of like, my God, an assault charge. I mean, we understand how this works. And so I'm glad he's going on. I think he should talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. By the way, I have nothing to do with John Majors. I don't know John Majors. I've never met any of his folks. I'm an interested party because I think a huge injustice is going on here. I cover politics. I've covered justice reform for a long time. And very rarely do you see a case with this much evidence in one person's favor go against that person. I've very rarely seen that. And so I'm going to continue to talk about this from the standpoint of communication strategy, but certainly it's a case that has a template that fits on a lot of other cases. And so it's an interesting thing to discuss. I really admire all of the other discussions that I'm seeing online by a lot of smart YouTubers out there who are doing a bang up job of really deep diving. So good luck. Thanks a lot. And if you're on the East Coast, enjoy the snow. Once again, Kat Wagner has a GoFundMe for the transcripts of Ms. Jabbari's testimony and a few others. I incorrectly said it was the entire transcript of the entire case. No, that was $2,511 for only a bits and pieces of transcript. But still, there's a GoFundMe to pay for that. And everybody knows that GoFundMe is great when it comes to crowd sourcing your fundraising. So if everybody just does $5 or $10, it'll get paid for. It doesn't require that one person give like 1,000, though that would be nice. But still, I would say I encourage everybody to donate. I'm going to donate again today. Thanks for Kat Wagner for getting out there and getting the transcripts, because it is really interesting to read the transcripts. Again, detail. A lot of these YouTubers out there, and the links are in the description of this video, are doing detailed analysis of this case in a way that mainstream media isn't even getting close to doing. So thanks a lot to Kat. Everybody check out that GoFundMe link. You can be anonymous if you want. And there we go. Good luck.